Hello everyone, welcome back to Out of Spec Guide. I'm Max, and you join me in a hotel room while I'm traveling, so pardon the unusual environment, but we've got a big roundup of the last week of EV news to go over, so it's just going to be me going over it this week, but I want to go over first in this segment what we've done in Out of Spec over the past week, then get into buyer-specific EV news about deals and things going on for those of you who are in the market and looking at EVs, and then we'll just touch on the industry news and things that have happened this week. Lastly, big stories. So a lot of stuff here between EV sales being actually higher and also growing pessimism among especially American auto companies struggling to adjust to EV still. So a lot going on here. So let's get into it and summarize it really quickly. We're still maturing this format, so if you have suggestions, please let us know. But first off, I wanted to give a huge shout out to work Francie did this week on the Out of Spec podcast channel and actual podcast, which you can subscribe to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you may get those. Colorado, she made an episode about, is now one of the top 5 states for EV sales. So the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, basically put out a press release saying it's really exciting that they've made this milestone. Colorado has some of the best incentives for EVs. And so within the last quarter, they basically had 17% total EV sales. Very exciting. She also commented that EV sales in the US have now surpassed 300,000 for the third quarter. So a lot of quarter three news. I'm going to talk about some other more pessimistic news about EVs in quarter three, but I really like the coverage Francie has been doing about how EVs are actually making progress with sales and market share in the US, even as we hear negative stories about inventory, profit margins, things we'll get into. But if you're an EV consumer, another thing to keep your eye out on the horizon are solid state batteries. Francie did a great story covering this with basically the upcoming NIO vehicles. NIO is a Chinese startup. They're kind of like Tesla or Rivian, but in China. They are a huge emerging auto brand who wants to have more of a global presence, but they have made filings for vehicles that would have solid state batteries. So long story short, solid state batteries could be the next great thing in batteries. Basically see faster charging performance, more safety, less risk of these EV fires you may have heard of. There's a lot of benefits, and of course better energy density, meaning cars with more range. So manufacturers like Toyota also trumpet solid state batteries being on the horizon, but we've seen lots of news between companies like QuantumScape and elsewhere in the industry that solid state is actually, there's good news about it. Now, don't expect vehicles on the market anytime soon with it, but if NIO is any indication, then they say that may be the case. So solid state, keep an eye on it. Things are happening there that are exciting. There's a lot of news there. Then I wanted to talk about what Kyle's done this week. He's been in Germany and he has visited a version 4 Tesla supercharging station in the Netherlands. Now, it's important to note these are dispensers, not chargers. To not get too nerdy here, what that means is basically it's a new interface for the chargers that drivers plug into. They look slightly different. They have credit card payment terminals and longer cables, so they're going to accommodate more cars. This is going to be necessary not only for the upcoming Tesla Cybertruck, but I think more relevantly and importantly, non-Tesla vehicles, which in Europe has been the status quo for a while and will be next year in the US. So non-Tesla vehicles will be more accommodated at these stations because they're going to eventually, once the chargers are also upgraded, going to support higher voltage, meaning vehicles can get their full charge speed. You're going to be able to pay at it with a credit card. And of course, you're going to be able to actually park your car appropriately because the cable will be long enough. So that's all exciting. Kyle also visited a really cool charging park in Hilden in Germany, the Seed and Greet charging hub. So you can check out his videos on the new V4 Tesla supercharger dispensers as well as this. The Seed and Greet one, I think if you're an American, is really enlightening to just look at how advanced these installations are getting in Europe, how many chargers there are, how high power there are, seeing Tesla superchargers alongside other units like these Alpatronic chargers. So if you want to learn more about like what the rest of the world is doing with charging, that's so interesting. If you're European, this won't be news to you, but some great coverage Kyle has done of the charging scene in Europe. Hopefully the US can become somewhat more like that. Anyhow, that's what some of the big things I wanted to highlight at Out of Spec. Let's get into buyer-oriented news stories. If you own a Chevy Bolt for model years 2020 to 2022, then GM is offering you $1,400. That's basically an upfront payment out of an expected settlement because they had their own battery issue. You may recall a few years ago, the 2017 to 2019 Bolts had their own battery recall. The 2020 to 22 had a separate recall. Basically, this has just been an ongoing saga, and GM can't seem to get past this. So your Bolt is probably safe. GM's installed diagnostic software that's supposed to basically tell you if you need a new battery, but no matter what, if you're one of these owners, then you can accept the $1,400, and there may be a settlement where you'll be entitled to more money, but you can accept that $1,400 from GM up front. Now, the whole software situation with what's going on with these bolts and it diagnosing and telling you whether your battery is safe or not, it's just been ongoing. It's such a complicated situation between the two generations of Bolt and the slightly different battery chemistries. It's an unfortunate fiasco because otherwise the Bolt has had such a great legacy as being an affordable EV, and yet GM and LG can't seem to get past this issue. Then we've got the Tesla Model Y long range. It's $500 more expensive. Not much news here. Tesla always is adjusting prices. They made the Model Y slightly more expensive. Perhaps they're predicting slightly more demand coming towards the end of the year, as some Model Ys and Model 3s may lose the tax credit next year. We have yet to see about that, but Tesla is expecting that. So basically, we're seeing Model Y slight price increases. There's also in China some price increases going on with Tesla models there. Interestingly, China gets a more updated Model Y than we do. I didn't even realize that, but that just shows you how global of a company Tesla is and how they're always changing prices globally and even in the US market. Then we've got good news for Mustang Mach-E buyers. Ford is discounting them. So the big headline here from Cars Direct is you could stack these discounts for up to $13,000. That's only if you're getting the most expensive Mach-E GT. Basically, the Mustang Mach-E, I like it as a vehicle. I feel like it's aged a little bit in the sense that it's not the most modern charging vehicle, maybe not the best road tripping vehicle. There's been recent recalls on them with their powertrains. Ford has been, I think, beset by a lot of bugs as well with Mach-E. Of course, it was an early competitor of the Model Y, and it's just, it seems like they've had to sort a few things. I really love the design of the Mach-E. I like a lot about its interior, and it is a vehicle, but I just wish it charged better, and I wish for customers' sake it was more reliable and had fewer of these recalls going on. Nonetheless, if you're in the market for a new Mach-E, you can stack these incentives, so it's eligible for half of the federal tax credit, and then depending on which trim you can get between like $2 and up to $10,000 in savings. Ford is basically offering a retail customer cash offer. The GT, you're spending a lot of money. Of course, you're saving the most with this rebate, but I think the California Route 1 spec of the Mach-E, that's always been the one I like. There's also Premium. Those get their $4,200 rebate. So without getting too into the nitty-gritty of that, thousands of dollars off Mach-E. Cool if you're in the market for that. Hyundai Ioniq 6 got a big price slash by up to $4,100. Car and Driver first reported this. So the starting price is now $38,000. Keep in mind that starting model is a rear-wheel drive base model. It's somewhat comparable to the base Tesla Model 3, but it has just over half the horsepower. It's not going to be nearly as quick. It will be efficient though. It's still getting decent range. I believe that trim gets somewhere in the neighborhood of 260 miles of range, so a little bit less than the base Tesla in terms of EPA rating, but it's getting a lot less power, but it is an efficient vehicle. So if you want an Ioniq 6, if you're intrigued by the design, I actually don't mind it, then that's sweet that it's getting cheaper this year. Hyundai is on a roll there. So that's kind of the consumer news. So let's get into the industry news, what's been happening. So Q3 has been kind of bloody for EV, specifically with the American automakers, the legacy brands. GM has, we reported last week, or we announced last week, that they were delaying the Silverado truck. They're also pushing back the Equinox, which was sort of supposed to be a replacement for the Chevy Bolt price-wise, that small crossover that's supposed to start at $30,000. We're expecting it probably to be a bit more expensive now, and the production's not going to happen by the end of this year like they said it would. So basically, they're trying to focus on profitability. GM is losing lots of money with EVs overall. Things were good for them this quarter, but their EV business is just killing them in terms of not being profitable. And so GM is getting increasingly anxious about that, saying we're going to kind of delay these investments. We're going to be less aggressive about EVs. They still have things to sort out with their Ultium platform, which is what they're using in all their new EVs. However, there is good news. They did say that the new Bolt is going to receive LFP batteries. What that means basically is it's going to type of battery technology that's lower cost. We see it in the base Tesla Model 3 and Model Y and Mach-E, which I've mentioned. All of these have adopted it. It's an exciting battery technology. You can look more into it in other full-featured videos. But basically, the new Bolt, it seems like they're making some smart moves towards cost cutting and making it a practical vehicle. Still probably going to be like 2 years away, though. It is by no means imminent. So unfortunate news with GM kind of just pushing things off. Then we've got some news about the auto worker strike. So GM and Ford have actually had agreements with the unions, which is cool. But Stellantis and Ford have, but GM has yet to. So they've just started striking at the plant where they build the Cadillac Lyriq. So on the topic of GM delaying things and having trouble producing enough of these vehicles, well, the Cadillac Lyriq is now delayed possibly further. Just as they were ramping up production, it's now the workers at that plant are on strike. They also make several gas vehicles, but a lot of the anxieties, interestingly, with the United Auto Workers strikes have revolved around EVs and concerns that basically many people's jobs are going to become obsolete or redundant. And so there's been some agreements here. I hope for GM's sake and for the workers' sake that they come to an agreement here and find some common ground, but good to see that Stellantis and Ford have patched that up. However, not good in terms of Q3 for Ford and EVs. Their losses continue. Their revenue is up. They're selling EVs. The inventory is there finally, but it just seems like basically they're hitting this demand limitation. And the story here is not to walk away and say, oh, no one wants EVs. It's just production is finally caught up, and Ford, when they're selling these EVs like the Lightning and the Mach-E, they're not making a profit. They're just trying to get stuff out there, but it's increasingly concerning to them how much money they're losing on each EV. And then, of course, the fact that the F-150 Lightning, which used to be hugely in demand, well, sales of that have just fallen right as they've caught up with production. So they're amassing inventory. They're a bit worried about this. And so the average loss they're making on each EV is 36 grand. That's, considerable, and it adds up. Nonetheless, this is what you have to do to get towards profitability in EVs. It's not easy. Right now, startups like Rivian are also losing money on every EV they make. But for Ford, as a, huge, increasingly big player in the EV space, this is concerning for the balance sheets. I hope they figure this out, but right now it basically seems like they are having some struggles with EVs. They're not going to pull back, but they are basically adjusting their guidance for the end of the year and increasing a little hesitant about that. That said, Hyundai is doing great with EVs. The Genesis brand grew, so did Hyundai overall. They've seen solid growth this year, and like I just reported earlier to you, right, the Ioniq 6 now for 2024 model year has some discounts, so they're making the right moves. They're being aggressive. They know they've got winners on their hands in terms of their products. Their EVs are amazing in terms of like the EV-ness of them. Their range is great, their efficiency, their charging. I think they can improve their software. They're working on that, little other elements of the experience, but they're making a lot of smart moves. So in contrast to the American automakers, Hyundai is actually doing quite well with EVs. Another more niche brand, Porsche, is doing okay. The Taycan is their only really EV product at the moment, and it is still down from its peak of demand. It's kind of been going steady since a dip that it's had, but it's really their only product here. Porsche is still largely their bread and butter, are like 911s and of course gas combustion sports cars. EV sports cars have yet to be something that they really proven is their niche yet, and it has to be as automakers adapt into electrification. The Porsche Macan EV has been spotted testing. There's been some people getting early access to it. Hopefully, we at Out of Spec and elsewhere, you can learn more about the Macan once there's more news to share there. But it looks like that's getting really, really close to being released, which is exciting. EV Macan would be a huge product segment for them compared to a sedan. Everyone wants that small crossover format, so that would be big news for Porsche, but no news there. Taycan at the moment is carrying them for EVs. It's their only product, and Porsche is doing well, but it's not necessarily because of EVs at the moment. Volvo, however, is one of the brands who is expecting EV momentum to continue. They've got the EX30 coming out, the compact, affordable vehicle everyone's super excited about. There's the EX90, their successor to the gas XC90, three-row SUV, coming out imminently. And then there will be the EM90 that they're expected to announce within a few weeks of me recording this. It's going to be an electric minivan. There's been some leaks. Electric minivan would be really cool for the market, by the way. Comment if you agree with me. But Volvo is expecting basically strong things to continue with EVs. They have not revised their guidance. They still have their ambitious goals to be at 50% EV sales share, and they want to be all electric in terms of their lineup by 2030. So they are continuing with that ambitious plan. lastly, let's get into some charging news for this week. So Electrify America has announced its Cycle 4 investment for California. So if you've been following recent history in EVs, Electrify America basically had to build their charging network out of a settlement of Dieselgate with Volkswagen, and they agreed to both with the US EPA and the state of California invest a certain amount of money. So they basically are completing that with Cycle 4, where they're going to upgrade 600 chargers to keep them reliable and working. And if you've been following news of Electrify America, you know this is needed. So that's cool. It's continuing basically compliance with how much they're supposed to invest in Californian infrastructure. They're also teasing their own new generation. Just like I told you about Tesla V4 superchargers, Electrify America wants to have new charging dispensers with a better interface, hopefully one that's more reliable and less buggy, better visibility, smaller footprint, more robust power modules, and other things backing up the chargers. So they are kind of teasing those, but we've yet to see any of those installed or any timeline for that. But they're upgrading chargers, which is what they need to do, spending the money. And if after completing this Cycle 4, they will have met their mandate to spend $800 million in California over 10 years. So cool. I mean, we're going to need more than just Tesla for charging here, so that's exciting. More news on charging, by the way. Tesla is actually now selling its chargers to non-Tesla company, to other third parties. So BP has its own charging network they've had for a bit called BP Pulse. It's expanding to the US. BP, of course, you know, is British Petroleum, big gas company, but they are trying to diversify and have EV investment, so they're making a $100 million deal with Tesla to buy Tesla superchargers. So this is exciting. Tesla superchargers have proven reliable hardware, and now they're being sold to third parties. And more competition in the open marketplace there. These look like the new V4 Tesla superchargers that I was telling you Kyle looked at, and so that's really neat. I am, expecting this to roll out. Not imminently, we're looking at the next few years for this, but basically lots of exciting promises here, reliable charging, of course, as well as plug-in charge capability. So it's going to support, for any vehicles that support it, the ability to just plug in and automatically start charging. No need to even deal with the credit card reader or payment because it will be set up ahead of time. So they're going to support that standard, which Tesla superchargers don't yet. Tesla does it with their own vehicles. They don't do it with other vehicles. So cool to see Tesla kind of just expanding their business, and it's good news for the overall charging ecosystem for non-Tesla drivers as well. So, $100 million is actually not that much money when we're talking about a company like BP, but it is something, so I like to see investments like that. Anyhow, that's basically been a recap of the news going on. Again, pardon me for the grainy webcam and the environment I'm in, AC in the hotel room. Again, I'm just traveling this weekend, but I still wanted to share this news roundup with you. We're going to do it every Monday, so please let me know how I can mature this format. I'm looking at the clock, 17 minutes. Okay, that's a bit tighter than last week. We're going to try to get these more and more kind of just bullet point, get you what you need to know across everything happening at Out of Spec and the EV industry at large. Think of it as like a too long didn't watch for those of you who don't want to ultra nerd out about anything. However, if you do, you can always click the links in the descriptions to each story I mentioned, as well as the Out of Spec videos I talked about. I've been Max. Thanks for joining me for this installment of Out of Spec Guide, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.